thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today is a very exciting video because I am talking about the best books that I read in 2022. And I read almost 100 books. I'm recording this before the end of the month, so I'm at like 97. And unless I read some super short books, I won't hit 100, probably 98, but still. So out of 98 books, I have a stack of 9 books right here that I will be talking about. I might talk about a few honorable mentions too at the end, but as of right now, I have 9 books. And I will say for my regular watchers who have been watching my monthly reading wrap-ups, those people will already know like all the books I'm about to be talking about because they are the same books that I've been gushing about all year long. However, there is one book that I read in December, so even my constant watchers, which is a play on constant readers, which is what Stephen King fans are called. Anyway, my constant watchers, there is still one book that you will not have heard me talk about because I read it this month. So there'll at least be one surprise. And also normally before a video like this, I would type up just some brief thoughts about each book just to have my thoughts be organized, but I'm just feeling wild today and I decided to not type up anything. And I'm just going to pick up each book and speak from the heart based on what each book makes me feel as I talk about it. So yeah, let's see how this goes. And before I talk about the books, I did want to say that if you love books that have like great characters who are just like so layered and have so much depth and so much nuance and they feel real and it's like very character driven books, then you could read any of these books I'm talking about because that is like the most important thing to me when I'm reading a book is to have great character development and characters that are just so fleshed out and you just feel like you know them. So if that's your jam, then you could read any of these and I would think you would love it because I think they all have great characters in them, great character development. But the first book I'm talking about is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And by the way, I do have book first movie episodes for a lot of these books. So I did do a book first movie for Frankenstein. But this one is of course a great character analysis of Victor Frankenstein as well as the monster, the creature he makes. And so not only is it just a great look into a man trying to create a living thing and wanting to feel like a god in that sense. And then also just like how self-centered he is. He and the creature are both very self-centered, but Victor just makes everything about himself and it is so frustrating. But at the same time, obviously he's incredibly smart. But then also just the science aspect of this book and like the moral aspect of this book, it just gives you so much to think about. And there's so many layers to this book too. Like the more you learn about Mary Shelley and her upbringing and then different symbolism and different interpretations of this book, like you could just do a deep dive and just spend so long just studying this book. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that one because I feel like that one is already so famous. And then next up is a book I have talked about a lot on this show, and that is Power of the Dog. I read this in January. So from January to June, it had the title of Best Book of the Year, which by the way, I'm not ranking these in any order, I'm just talking about them. And as far as which book is best book of 2022, that will be determined in my December reading wrap up. So I have not yet decided. So this, I'm just talking about them in no particular order. Anyway, Power of the Dog by Thomas Savage. I read this in January. It is incredible. Again, like you have such a great antagonist in this book. Like he is so sneaky and conniving, and yet he can also be very charming in a way. And he's like the life of the party, and he's so smart and he's well respected. And yet he can also just be like so cold, right? And so mean and manipulative. And so fantastic antagonist. And then you also have the romance between Phil. So Phil is the antagonist, and then his brother marries a woman named Rose, and Rose has a son named Peter. And so the character development of Peter as the book goes on is amazing. And also the romance between Rose and the brother too. I really love their relationship as well. But the focus is Phil. And then once Peter comes onto the farm, there's more happening with that as well. But this one, again, like it's short. It's less than 300 pages. And yet it seems like it should be longer. Like when I think back on it, because there was just so much to this book and I could not put it down. And it was so transportive and so vivid. And the ending, I was just like, oh my gosh, like it was amazing. It definitely kind of comes suddenly, but it is a slow burn throughout this whole book, right? So you're waiting for something to happen and then finally that ending does happen. But there's just so much to this book, like I said, so highly recommend it. And the movie was great too. I really loved that as well. And then up next is the only Stephen King book on this list. So I read a lot of Stephen King last year. I read like about one a month. There were a couple months I skipped, so I don't think it came out to 12 officially, but I probably ended up reading like 9 or 10 Stephen King books last year. So that is a lot. Only one of them actually I'm going to have two Stephen King books. So just real quick, I'm going to talk about this one pretty briefly, but 11/22/63 is a fantastic Stephen King book. Yes, it is huge. It's over 800 pages, but this one is great for someone who hasn't read Stephen King and who doesn't like horror, because this is not a horror novel. It is like sci-fi because it deals with time travel about a guy who wants to go back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination, but he time travels to like 1958 and the assassination is in 1963, so he has some years to kill. And so it's just about his time living in the past, and there's a romance that happens, and it's also he goes back in time as well to protect a future student, to stop some things from happening in his life. And then 1962, 63 rolls around and he starts getting into the Kennedy stuff, and then the time travel aspect was so well written, and this was just an incredible book. And yes, it's long, but it is so worth it. A lot of people name this as their favorite Stephen King book, and yeah, it was amazing and I really loved it. And then the next Stephen King book, this is the one I was originally going to talk about, but I couldn't not talk about 11/22/63. But Dolores Claiborne, I feel like this is such an underrated Stephen King book, because 11/22/63 you hear a lot of people talk about, but Dolores Claiborne I feel like isn't talked about enough. This book is amazing. It is about a woman who is being interrogated about the murder or about the death of this lady she worked for. And so throughout this interrogation, she is giving her story and she explains how she is not responsible for the death of this woman she worked for, but how she is responsible for the death of her husband who died like years prior. And so we just get her whole life story. It is just incredible. Like the character of Dolores, I just loved her so much. And it is just so well written because it's written like it's just what Dolores is saying, if that makes sense. So when a cop asks her a question, we don't hear the question he asks. We just hear her answer because it's like being tape recorded. So it's like this is the transcript of the tape recording. But yeah, so well written, and the details of her husband's death are just so well done, and the character of her husband, like I said, like he's the villain, he's an antagonist in this book, but he does have depth to him. Not that I was sympathizing with him by any means, but I just hate like the villains that are just like a caricature. And so I felt like he did feel fleshed out. But yeah, and I love the character of Dolores, like I just said, and this was just such a fantastic book and I really loved it. And I thought it was very different for King. Like there's some aspects where it definitely feels like a King novel, but I feel like it's not necessarily I don't know, what am I trying to say? It like some books just feel like Stephen King, right? And this one has some of those hallmarks, but at the same time, it did feel different than what he usually writes. So yeah, more people should be talking about this book. More people should be reading it. It was fantastic. And then, so Dolores Claiborne, I read that like in May or something. And I don't remember if that won for best book of the month, because I know it was a tie between Dolores Claiborne and The Last House on Needless Street. And I don't remember which one I chose to be the winner, but both of these were so good. So this one, Catriona Ward, Last House on Needless Street, is about a woman who is trying to find the person who kidnapped her sister like a decade earlier. And so she goes to this guy who lives on The Last House on Needless Street, and she moves in next door to watch him. And so we just find out the mystery of this guy who lives in this house, who owns this cat, as well as this woman and her past with her sister. And oh my gosh, it was so good, so well done, such a page turner. The ending, like, it was incredible. It was so well researched as well. Like you should definitely read the afterword written by the author, and that just helps you get even more perspective as to her intention with this book and like why she wrote it. But yeah, it was incredible. It is creepy. It's a horror book, I guess. And there was like one scene that definitely like kind of creeped me out when I went to bed that night. And it has some heavy topics for sure. Just trigger warning with this one. It does deal with child abuse. And so that was tough to read, but again, just so well done. Incredible. Highly recommend this book. Later this year, I read Sundial, also by Catriona Ward. Did not like Sundial. So skip out on Sundial, but definitely read Last House on Needless Street. And then we have Native Son by Richard Wright. Again, I don't know if this one won for the month. I don't remember what. Oh, actually, maybe I read this the same month I read Bullet Train. Anyway, Native Son is incredible. It was written in the 1930s and it is about a Black man who accidentally murders a white woman and then just everything that happens after that. Like, this book moves quick. Like, you will not be able to put it down. Things just keep happening at a quick pace. And again, a great character analysis into Bigger Thompson? No, I can't remember his last name. But anyway, his first name is Bigger though. And it is just such an in-depth look into him and his psyche and what made him the way he is. And obviously, like, the racism and Jim Crow of the time influenced his actions. And so it's a story of naturalism because he's a product of his environment, and like the world is why he became the way he did. And I will say the last third of the book, the plot definitely slows down. However, I still couldn't put the book down though, because even though the plot isn't, you know, moving as quickly at that point, there is just so many like deep, powerful passages and deep, powerful experiences between characters that I just don't have anything negative to say about this book, honestly. I thought it was so good. It was tough to read at times, for sure, for various reasons. I have a book versus movie for this if you want to hear me talk about it more in depth, but definitely read this book, and it was fantastic. It is intense. I just felt so strongly throughout this book, a variety of emotions, and yeah, highly, highly recommend. And then we have Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This, I think this is a first edition copy. So this seems like a first edition copy. It just is missing the dust jacket, unfortunately. I also have my Easton Press edition as well as Frankenstein, but that Easton Press edition is so big and heavy, so sorry there's no like actual cover. I'll just put the image up. But yeah, Grapes of Wrath. This is about the 1930s, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression. We have people migrating from the Midwest to California to get work, and it is about this family's journey. And we do spend a lot of time when they're in, I forget what state they're from, but when they're in that Midwest state, we get a lot of time there and their journey to California. And then once they're in California, that's probably like the last third of the book. Maybe more than a third, but it's not just about their time in California, it's about everything leading up to that. And again, great character analysis, great character development, and we get a whole family. And I love books that focus on families, partly because, I don't know, maybe with my own family, I like, you know, we have our different family dynamics within my own family. So then I guess I just like reading about families as well and finding the differences or the similarities. But anyway, so many great characters. They all have so much depth, which I know I've been saying that about like every book, but as well as their character arcs throughout the book is also just so satisfying. And it's just such a powerful book. And also, like, for historical context, it's a great one to read because it is based on things that actually happened. And it is just terrible, the things that were happening, and very eye-opening and sad, but also like inspirational in a way as to like what the characters do in these situations. But yeah, highly recommend. I love John Steinbeck. I would recommend any of his books. It's not like I've read all of his books, but I loved Grapes of Wrath, my first time reading it this year, and yeah, it was incredible. It was such an experience. And as of right now, it holds the title of Best Book of 2022. We will see if that lasts. Anyway, on to the next book. Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. Sorry about the glare. Speaking of Ken Kesey, my next book versus movie will be January 4th, and it is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is also by Ken Kesey. But Sometimes a Great Notion is amazing. Again, it's another book that follows a family. The family itself has drama going on between the brothers, but then you also have drama between this family and the town because of a strike that is happening, and the family refuses to take part in the strike, so then they're like ostracized by the town. And oh my gosh, there is just so much going on in this book, and the characters are incredible, and I love, like, you just feel the characters so well. Each and every one of them are just so distinct. The majority of them are men. There's only like one main female character, but considering how sexist One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was, I'm impressed that this one like didn't come across as sexist, and the main character, or the main female, I forget her name now, but I didn't have any issues with her character in this book. Some of the men within the book have a sexist attitude, but that didn't bother me the way that just like the whole message of Cuckoo's Nest bothered me. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Sometimes a Great Notion. Highly recommend. Again, this one is long. It's over 600 pages, but it is worth every page. And I just love books that, like, people could be annoyed being like, oh, we got some side story, some tangent on this character, something that happened when he was in high school. Like, why did we need that story? But I love books that do that because like I said, I want to feel like I know these characters, and the more stories I hear about them and the more backstory I get, the more real they feel. And again, like, there's no good guy or bad guy in this book. Like, everybody, you can see their perspective, and you switch perspectives, and so you see how people are misinterpreting each other, which can be so frustrating, but it helps you to just get a really level view of everybody and see where everybody is coming from, and you have an understanding and an appreciation for them, and you're invested in each and every one of them. And they're all just such unique characters, like, that I won't forget. Joby, who was incredible, but also Hank, and then Henry, I believe, is the dad. The movie stars Paul Newman and Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda. And Henry Fonda was great in the role of the dad. Like, he just has this liveliness, which he had in the book as well. But of course, Paul Newman was also amazing as Hank. But anyway, fantastic book. If you love family sagas, you should definitely check this one out. And it also talks about, like, they work in lumber, cutting down like these giant trees in Oregon. And so just that aspect of it too, I thought was really cool. There's also a section where we get the perspective of a dog, which I like that, and that was unique. And the ending of this one, just to talk about it a bit more, it's amazing. Like, you will just be cheering and just be so happy, and it's just a fantastic ending. On to another one that just brought me so much happiness reading this book, and that is Bullet Train by Kotaro Isaka. This book was just so much fun, and yet at the same time there was just so much heart to it, right? And there's moments that were like actually sad, but then there were moments that also were just like so sweet and heartwarming, and it was everything you could want in a book. In a way, depending on your taste, but definitely better than the movie. So depending whether you like the movie or not, you should definitely give the book a read. I also have a book versus movie if you just want to hear the differences, but again, great characters. I could see someone like, so it is a very humorous book, which Power of the Dog actually has quite a bit of humor in that one as well, but maybe it's a more subtle or maybe more dry humor, if that's the right word. Whereas this one is more like quirky humor. And so I could see some people maybe being annoyed by it and it just doesn't hit them right. And it's also definitely dark humor as well, so it depends on your taste as far as that goes. But I just found the characters to be so fun, and I loved their interaction and their banter between each other with all of them. And there was a lot going on, but I never felt confused because it was just well written and all the characters were just so distinct. I never got them confused with each other. And this one, again, has a great antagonist. He is maybe more one-dimensional because he's basically like a psychopath, but he is still just so well written. And at times it's just like so frustrating and you just hate him so much, which is how you should feel about the antagonist, I guess, right? And then, yeah, just the events that happen with him and Kimura in this book, like, but then you also have Nanao, who was amazing, and Lemon and Tangerine, and then Maria, and so much going on here, but it was amazing and I loved it all. And then if you have read Three Assassins, Suzuki is a main character in Three Assassins, and then he is a side character in this. And so I definitely recommend reading both because I love Bullet Train more, but I think you benefit, like reading Three Assassins made me like Bullet Train even more than I already did. So I definitely recommend both, even though I like Bullet Train better. But yeah, this book is just, like I said, it's such a fun time, and yet at the same time, like, I think it made me cry, if I recall, with the ending, because I just loved it so much. And Three Assassins has an amazing ending as well. So Isaka is just great at writing a powerful ending. Again, fun, dark comedy, quirky, heartwarming, sweet, sad, funny, exciting, page turning. It's all of that stuff. And then last but not least, the book that I read, I literally finished this last night, so it's been less than 12 hours, but We Were the Mulvaneys by Joyce Carol Oates. So I read a short story by Joyce Carol Oates in like April, and then I read Blonde in like July, August, and then I read this one, and safe to say, like, I had mixed feelings about Blonde, but overall I did give it 4 stars. And then this one was a 5-star read, and so I just am so excited to read more of Oates' books, so I definitely will be reading more of her books next year. But this one is about a family, and I was getting sometimes a Great Notion vibes because it is about a family who is just like a tight-knitted clan, and they are respected by the community, but then something happens that causes them to be ostracized, and they kind of lose their place in the community, you know? So it was similar in that sense. Aside from that, the storylines are like completely different. But yeah, so we have the Mulvaney family, and then something happens in 1976 that just changes the family and the dynamic within the family members, and the dad especially just kind of derails because of this event. It's a hard one to read because of the event that happens, which I'll just say right now, it's not a spoiler, but it's a sexual assault that happens. And so it's tough to read for that reason, but I was just so engaged, and these characters all felt so real, similar to sometimes a Great Notion. Like, we just get so many stories with each character so that we get such a good feel for each of them. Like, even like when I think about the plot, some of the events, I'm like, wow, like that was kind of drastic for that character to have done that. But it doesn't make me like the book less, because for one, like, the point is to show how something like rape, how it ruins lives, right? Like, it is not something to be taken lightly, and we should not have the attitude of boys will be boys and like all that crap. So that was her point, was to show like what this does, not only to the person, but to everybody involved, right? The whole family. And yeah, did the family handle it the best way? No, not all of them, but again, like I don't fault the book for that. Like it doesn't bother me that they didn't handle it well necessarily. But so yeah, I was just always so fully immersed in this book, and I just loved the experience of being in this world with the Mulvaneys, and as they each go on their journey. And it spans from, I mean, we get some of the parents' story from like the 40s and 50s, and the book ends in the 1990s. So it spans decades following this family, and I just love books like that, and the ebb and flow of their relationships and how each of them learn to cope with what their family has been through. So I just thought it was fascinating, so well written. Joyce Carol Oates is an amazing writer. Like she is so vivid, so descriptive, and just a beautiful writer as well. And it's not flowery, which I'm not against flowery writing, but yeah, just amazing prose, fantastic writer, and I just loved every minute in this book. I was actually reading this as well as another book. I was going back and forth. But early on, I dropped the other book because I was like, I don't even care about that one. I just want to stick with this one. So that's how good it was that I couldn't skip between books and I just had to focus on this. So a great family saga. And yeah, again, like I like family sagas because there's things where I'm reading about these relationships and there's things that I can relate to. But then even if there's things I can't relate to, I just find it so interesting about family dynamics. I don't know. I think that's a really intriguing topic. And then, like I said, great character development. We get a feel for each of these characters. There is one son we don't hear about quite as much, but the others we definitely are in their heads and knowing what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And yeah, it was just an amazing book. Highly recommend it. And that's it for the 9 best books I read this month. I hope I was articulate and not too all over the place with that as I gathered my thoughts about each of these, but they're all incredible. Just thinking about any one of these books, I'm just filled with so many emotions. Because a great book makes you feel emotion so strongly, right? Like sometimes they make you feel negative things. There were times in We Were the Mulvaneys or Native Son where I was feeling such negative emotions, but that's what the writer was going for, right? And they succeeded. But also ones where I felt such positive and great emotions too, you know? So anyway, all of those books are amazing. Would recommend all of them. I also read Anne of Green Gables this year, which I also absolutely love, but I didn't talk about it because it's one I'd read in the past, which is why I was hesitant to even talk about Frankenstein, because again, it's one I knew I loved. But anyway, I did have like 5 honorable mentions. Maybe I'll still just do them super quick. So these are all written by women, interestingly enough. So I'll go through these so fast. What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. It is a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. So creepy, so visceral, so much body horror, so well written. I absolutely loved it. It's super short. If you love like creepy body horror books, you should definitely read this one. And then I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. All of BookTube has been talking about this one ever since it was released. And it is... Books just fell. But anyway, it is a fantastic memoir. So I absolutely loved it. She's so open, so vulnerable, so honest, and it was just incredible. Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. This one I read in February and I loved it. I will say it's kind of lessened over time, and now when I think back, it isn't as strong a memory as other books. However, I did love it. It is very unique. It is very different. And as a woman, I just found it very empowering, and I just loved reading about, you know, the female experience. It does deal with motherhood. I'm not a mother, but nonetheless, I just still really loved this book. And it's definitely weird, which I like weird books as well, when they're well done. Notes on an Execution with Cindy. Absolutely loved this book. And I will say it is very thought-provoking. Great characters, again, such in-depth characters in here. And it deals with the death penalty, and it really gets you thinking about that. But it's also following a serial killer, but it's not like we're seeing it through the eyes of the woman in his life. And so I thought that was a really cool take on it. Again, you know, it is a dark subject matter, it is heavy, but I just loved it, and it was so thought-provoking. Mexican Gothic, this one grew on me, just like the fungus within the book. No, but this one and What Moves the Dead both deal with fungus. But What Moves the Dead maybe more so. Anyway, this one, it's called Mexican Gothic, and so it has that Gothic novel feel and a lot of those Gothic novel tropes, but it is so well done. And it also deals with like a lot of complex issues, and yet she tackles all of these issues so well. So it is very creepy and unsettling, but you can't put it down. You want to find out what's going to happen. I absolutely loved the main character. I was rooting for her the whole time. Yeah, highly recommend this one. And then A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan, which, by the way, I have a book called Weird Books by Women Authors, and some of these I talked about in that video, and so this is one of them. It is definitely a slow burn, and when things happen though, like suddenly like things are happening. But I was engaged the whole time, and the ending is like like wow, like that's what people talk about with this book, is because it's just like so like wow. But yeah, it deals with like social media and like, you know, when you're Instagram stalking people, plus also like the self-help culture, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, it's very odd, but I absolutely loved it. I want to give this one a reread, so I plan on reading it again at some point soon. But yeah, a lot to think about. It's also pretty funny too. It has some dark humor as well, so I like that. And yeah, that wraps it up for the best books I read in 2022. So many amazing books. Let me know what the best books you read this year were. Comment down below. Comment down below what you think of these books that I just talked about and what you, if you like them or not. And also you can comment down below guessing what book I will be naming as the best book of 2022. And books from past months are not out of the running, which I know I'm kind of breaking my own rules, because once a book loses its position of best book of 2022, it's just supposed to stay in the past. But I might bring a past book back and go back on what I had previous thought, if that makes sense. So anyway, basically what I'm saying is any of these 9 books could potentially be named best book of 2022, not just Grapes of Wrath. So comment down below which one you think I will end up naming as my favorite. So thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.